Hello everyone and welcome to Module 3. In the previous two modules we built a robust data input system that automated much of the input, after which we were able to use filters, functions and slicers to instantly perform calculations on the data. Module 3 uses an Excel feature called pivot tables to enable the data to be easily grouped and rearranged to provide new perspectives and analysis on the information. In this session we're going to create a pivot table and configure it to best suit our needs. So to create a pivot table, click anywhere in an Excel table, click Insert and click Pivot Table. In this instance, we're going to put the pivot table into an existing worksheet because we have worksheets set up for them. But normally you just select the default here, new worksheet, and say OK, and that will be fine. But we're going to an existing worksheet. I'm going to find the location for that now, which is in PVT1. Click on the input cell here and say OK. So we're now presented with a blank pivot table on the worksheet and the pivot table fields pane on the right hand side. The layout of this is not particularly suitable because I have to scroll up and down to see all the columns, which is a little bit unfortunate. So in order to make that a bit easier for myself, I'm going to go to settings here and put fields side by side. So now all the fields can be seen, and then the different areas of the pivot table are over to the right hand side. If we go down the fields, there are a couple of things I want to do with the data. One of them is that I want to group it by county, but I also want to group it by province, and there's no field there for province. At this initial stage, because I know that at some stage I'll want to do that, now is the time to set up provinces in the pivot table. Similarly with products, I have product names, but I don't have product categories. And there's no place in the table that contains product categories. So we're going to create categories as well. That's a bit of housekeeping that we do at the start. And so let's go and see how that's done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the field Cust County to create a pivot table of just the county names here. So there's no values here, no totals, no nothing. It's just that. And now I'm going to use the Control and Click feature to create the provinces. So I'm going to click Carlow, Dublin, Longford, Offaly, Wexford and Wicklow. All are in Leinster, so they're a group. And then a pivot table analyze, you'll see group selection. If I click group selection, that groups them into group 1, which we will rename at some stage to Leinster. To create the other provinces, I'll just collapse here. And then we go to the next province, which is Cavan, Derry, Donegal and Monaghan. And they are Ulster, so we can group that selection. That's group 2. We'll shrink that. Cork, Tipperary, Waterford and Limerick. We'll group that selection. And finally, Galway, Leitrim, Mayo, Roscommon and Sligo. And we'll group that selection. We'll shrink them all. Now we just have to go and rename each group. So the first group was Leinster. The second group is Ulster. The third group is Munster. And the final group is Connacht. So now we have created our provinces. And you'll notice now that there is a new field appeared that is not on the original table. And it's called Cust County 2. So it's based off the counties here. That's not particularly easy to remember. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that name as well. So to change that name, we're going to go to the active field here and we're going to give it a new name. So it says Cust County 2 there. We're going to call that province and press enter. So we have Cust County and now we also have a province field. So we're going to do the same now for categories. It's a little bit simpler for categories. So it's product name. So we'll select 10 products and we'll just call them category 1. So we're going to group them and shrink. And then the same again, group and shrink. And then we'll go again, group and collapse. And finally, and we'll group and collapse again. And same again, group 1 becomes bedding, group 2 becomes decor, group 3 becomes cleaning, and group 4 becomes furniture. Once again, of course, when we click on the group field, we'll see that in the active field, you'll see it's called product name 2. So now we have a product name and now product name 2, which is the groups. I'm going to call that category. It's a good idea to group items ahead of time because all subsequent pivot tables will be based off this pivot table. So if you leave the grouping until later pivot tables, when you go back to your previous pivot tables, you'll find that the group names, etc., will disappear. So although you have the groups made, the previous pivot tables won't know the names of the groups, etc., so you'll have to go back and do all that work retrospectively. It's good to have a bit of a think at this stage when you're creating your item groups. Now there's other bits of housekeeping we're going to do to make sure that this pivot table is a good master pivot table for all the future ones to come. And that is to set up our numbering systems, etc. So let's just have a look. We'll throw the total amount on. So we just click on this to put the total. So you see the total here is our numbers, and Excel assumes that numbers will go into the values area here, which is fine. So these numbers are not formatted very well for us. I'm just going to right click on any number in the grouping. And we picked number format, not format cells, but number format. Number format will apply to the entire pivot table, not just the cells that have been selected. So it's a number format. We want accounting. In this case, we want 0, and we'll pick Irish Euro and say OK. So that's the numbers done the way we want. And now there's a couple of other things we want to set up as well. So while we're in the pivot table analyze tab here, let's go to options. We'll click options here. For empty cells, show 0. We also don't want to autofit column widths on update. If you autofit, the table resizes every time you refresh, and it can be a bit disconcerting, so I like to leave that off. The pivot table name here, we'll call it PVT1. The other thing we want then in the design is the report layout. So the default report layout in Excel is the compact form. But for clarity, it's usually best to show it in tabular form. So in tabular form, you will see the grouping. If I expand that grouping, you'll see that the products come up in this separate column. In compact form, they're just indented under here. But generally speaking, if you want to export information out of here, it's good to have all the data into its separate columns. Also, for clarity sometimes, it's useful to have the labels for the groups repeated all the way down, just as products are repeated all the way down here. So in order to achieve that, we'll right click, go to field settings, and in layout and print, just say repeat item labels. This only works in tabular format. So as in the design, when we did the report layout, we showed in tabular form. This feature only shows here. And it's very useful when you want to export data and you need to see these fields fully completed. The other setup we want to see for clarity is just to change the style of the table here. When this grows, we want to be able to see horizontal lines here so we can follow these records quite easily. So Excel has a bunch of styles here. You just pick one that suits. There's one there, looks quite well. Any of these with a horizontal line on will do us. We'll just pick the black and white one there. That's it for this session. Now that we have our master pivot table sorted, we can get on and do some interesting things with it. Okay, so thanks a lot and bye for now.